New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here. Welcome to this week's episode of The Inclusive Church, where we remind ourselves each week that we have made a commitment to be inclusive in our spiritual communities, and that requires us to think differently, speak differently, behave differently, plan differently, respond differently, all the different ways for us to show up, to demonstrate the commitment, right? Commitment, we can think about it, we can mentally make a commitment, we can emotionally make a commitment, but that's all internal and invisible until we translate that commitment into behavior, into action. So, that's what this show is about, giving you tips and tools and ideas and updating you on trends and sometimes kicking your butt a little bit to get you to do something that demonstrates your commitment to inclusion. Now, why do I do this? Just in case it is your first time being exposed to us live or the recording of today's show. I am the author of a book, Stained Glass Spirit, Becoming a Spiritual Community Where Oneness Does Not Require Sameness, and also host a website, stainedglassspirit.net, with the idea that oneness means we are all connected, and it takes all of us to make the one body of God. However, we are each very different from one another, and in our spiritual communities, we do not need for everyone to be the same in order for us to behave with unity, behave with harmony, behave as an example of love. So that's that. Also, I talk about inclusive church, not just inclusive spiritual community or inclusive ministry, because I am doing my part to reclaim the word church. So when I am saying church, I am not talking about a building. I'm not talking about a preacher on Sunday. I am talking about a community of people who have come together to study together, to support each other, to practice the spiritual principles that are taught by their movement or their spiritual belief system. And so the church is the people, not the property, and really not even the historical process of Sunday morning. So, inclusive church. All that said, what are we talking about today? Well, it is November. We are in the month where in the United States, there is so much focus on Thanksgiving, so much focus on being grateful. Not that we should Not that we don't need to be grateful or give Thanksgiving any other time of the year. It's not an either or thing. It is in November in the US. We focus more on gratitude and Thanksgiving. We um, emphasize the importance of it, even though it's true all year long. And so it struck me that maybe it would be great to spend 20 or 30 minutes today on Inclusive Church talking about being grateful for inclusion. Now, between you and me, I did stop and think, is it grateful for inclusion or is it grateful for diversity? And and of course, we want to be grateful for both. However, I chose inclusion because if if we are grateful for the diversity that is a natural expression of the creative power and presence of the divine, that is okay. But it's not so much that we have to do much to create diversity, because that's already built in. The fact that each one of us is a unique creation of the divine. And so the diversity exists, whether we choose to notice it or not. But what we are called to do, if we are committed to creating heaven on earth, we are called to create the ways that we behave and the structures that we design. We are called to create inclusion. And people who are watching the Inclusive Church have already made a commitment, in most cases, have already made a commitment to be more inclusive. And so, if that's the case, then I wanted us to spend the time being grateful for inclusion, for what we have committed to actually demonstrating, for having a demonstration of inclusion based on the efforts that we have put forth, that we're seeing it come to be. We are including people who may have been excluded in the past or who we may have not even noticed. We may have had some blind spots in the past and didn't even realize that we were not showing up in a way that was welcoming to others. Or we welcomed a lot of people and couldn't figure out why they weren't staying because we weren't really changing anything. We were inviting them and welcoming them to come in because we're so great and they can come in and be just like us without seeing who they are and without us making any modifications to be like them or to create an environment where they actually feel seen. So, so today, let's talk a little bit about being grateful this month for inclusion. And for really, if I had room for a longer title, I probably would have said being grateful for our commitment to inclusion. But I didn't have that many character spaces. So, why do we want to be grateful for inclusion? Many of you know I often start with the why. Like, why is that important? And inclusion does not happen automatically. So, when we say we're grateful for the inclusion that we are experiencing, or that we are creating, or that we are expanding, we are actually reminding ourselves that I am grateful for this opportunity to be an example of spiritual love in action. I am grateful that I am a part of a community where leaders have prioritized inclusion and have been willing to commit to do the work to understand what behavioral changes are required in order to then manifest the desired inclusion. I am grateful that I can look at spiritual principles or spiritual qualities like harmony, and unity from a spiritual perspective, and see how over the last 3 years these 8 things have been done in order to demonstrate those two qualities in the human experience with people who navigate or who visit and then become members of my church. So the why of being grateful is the same why that we use to be grateful about any and everything else. And it's really interesting, I think. It's interesting to me, at least, and maybe I'm weird in this way, but it's interesting to me to recognize how often when I am sharing a list of things I am grateful for, they are things that other people have done to make my life easier. Right? There are so many things on my gratitude list that are I benefit from what other people have done. And then, of course, there's a section of my gratitude list that is like yours. There are things that have been created by God that I can enjoy or that I can be grateful, right? I can be grateful for the cycle that goes from night to day without any help from me, that the sun rises every morning and I am awakened by the light, and that the sun sets in the evening, and that this cycle has been created by God. It is a part of nature, and this is how I benefit from it. So still, even when I'm talking about nature, so often it is because I'm thankful because I get a benefit. I get a benefit from it. So when we talk about being grateful for inclusion, it can be a little uncomfortable because to be grateful for inclusion in my spiritual community, I'm grateful for the acts that I am taking. I'm grateful for the things that I am doing to create unity, harmony, love in my spiritual community and beyond. Now, I can also say what I get from that. That is a benefit, right? I am grateful for the commitment to inclusion in my spiritual community because I get to see how God shows up in people who are nothing like me, who are very different from me. And um, I get to have experiences that enrich me because I hear about things that others are doing that I would never think to do myself. So I can get to that place of inclusion is something I'm grateful for because I benefit from it in these ways, this list of ways. But so much about being grateful for and being thankful about inclusion, especially in my spiritual community, so much of it is about, oh, I am so grateful that I am a part of a community that calls me forth, calls me to operate at a higher standard. It calls me to, I'm grateful that it calls me to stretch because I need to engage with someone who whose experience is very different from mine. But what we share in common is a commitment to learn and practice and teach science of mind or universal spiritual principles. So it is a little different than what we often think about when we are considering what we are grateful for. So I'm going to invite you to be grateful beyond your comfort level and consider being grateful for inclusion. And for the next week, at least, every day to think about, why am I grateful for my community's commitment to be inclusive? Why am I grateful for inclusion at my church? So that's really the why. And I do want to come in very, very briefly about the when. Um, when to be grateful for inclusion. And it, the easy answer is all year long, every day. 365 days a week, 24 hours a day, or all waking hours. And that is true. That is really, really true for all of us. And as I said at the very top of the show, it's still important to highlight. And the good thing about being grateful about inclusion in this month, in November, is that it weaves itself in to so many other things that we may be talking about, or we may be more accustomed to talking about, related to gratitude, related to Thanksgiving. Um, and so it's a both and. I do want you and your community to consider honoring a lot of different cultural months at the time that they are featured on the calendar. So I encourage you to think about Black History Month and to do some very specific things during that month. I encourage you this month, in the month of November, to be aware of Native American Heritage and History Month and to integrate that in some way as you go through the month. I definitely encourage you to, in my part of the country, Pride Month is June. I know in a lot of other places, Pride Month is October. And so whenever it is in where you're located, to integrate gratitude and honor for all the different cultural celebrations throughout the year. And November, because we're talking about gratitude in general, is a good time because for most people, they are not focused on one particular aspect or dimension of diversity. And so it allows you to really talk about the work that you are doing in your church to be inclusive, and how you expect that to manifest itself or to show up in what you are doing. So it is a Tuesday where I'm not chatting with or interviewing a featured guest. So I am very committed to making this a toolkit Tuesday, where I try to stay around 30 minutes, 30 to 25 to 35 minutes, somewhere in there. And I'm going to do that, but also want to give you some practical tips. So if you are willing to integrate your Thanksgiving or your gratitude for inclusion this month, then of course, if you are someone who is giving a talk this month for any spiritual community, then absolutely, when you are talking about or beginning to list the things that you're grateful for, include that you're grateful for inclusion, or for your church's commitment to inclusion, which is probably better wording to be clear, because inclusion in itself, right, requires some actions to be taken. So you could be grateful for the progress that your church has made to be more inclusive. You could be grateful for the work that a particular team or group of people have done during the past 12 months that demonstrates your church's commitment to inclusion. You can talk about being grateful for the commitment to inclusion and then give examples of what you or what others have done. So if you can incorporate that into any talk that you are planning or that you are giving, where you are providing examples of things that you or that your community is grateful for, that is an easy place to integrate this gratitude for the commitment to inclusion. Another thing that you can do if you are teaching a class during this month is you can take a part of at least one class session and you can really integrate this topic of inclusion and the work that it requires and how that is something for us to consciously and intentionally be thankful for. And the more that you can provide one or two specific examples so that people in your church understand that it requires action, not just thinking, not just hoping, not just wishing, but it takes behavioral change in order to create and maintain a community where people are modeling inclusion as a norm. It's not unusual behavior, it is normal behavior in your church. So, including in talks, if you're teaching a class, integrating it in with whatever you're talking about. I know that at my home base spiritual community, at the church that I attend as my home church, one of the classes that's being taught right now is spiritual economics, based on Eric Butterworth's work and book. And I don't know what chapters of the book they're on right now. So I'm not saying this should happen exactly this way, but I think it would be really easy to build in a 15-minute conversation in the course of a class where we either focus on the range of economic participation in our own spiritual community and what does it reflect and how are we inclusive of people who are experiencing different levels of economic comfort and security, and how do we consciously do that in our church. It's a pretty easy example to talk about. And again, depending on what the theme for the week is or what chapters in the book the class is reading, building something in that talks about during this month of Thanksgiving. I'm really grateful for how we are being inclusive in our spiritual community, adapting X, Y, and Z. I mean, there are a lot of examples that are going through my mind right now. And I want to give you 2 or 3 other things to think about. So I'm not going to get distracted over here. But whatever classes you may be offering. Another place that you can engage and you can model and you can encourage people to be grateful for inclusion, even if your entire month has already been planned in terms of talks and classes and group activities. You can take, I was going to say 30 minutes, but it doesn't even take that. You could take 15 or 20 minutes and you could insert or add at least one message on your social media platform each week, each remaining week in November, that also maybe there is a quote that you use, maybe there is a YouTube video of a song that to you represents the commitment that your church has made to inclusion, and then use the post part of the message to simply say, we are grateful for the commitment to inclusion in our community, and then let the quote or the song affirm that message. And if you um, want to do that and a little bit more, you could also have a post on your website in a prominent place that shows up for the rest of the month, or related to something specific you're doing on Thanksgiving Day, or during Thanksgiving week. That again makes it very clear to not to members of your community and visitors or guests to your community that this is an actual commitment, and it is a commitment that requires us to speak and behave differently than we may have before the commitment. It also allows you to remind people that it's not just the commitment of the senior minister, because one person cannot make a church that is inclusive. It requires everyone. So you could choose to embed that in your messages, whether they are social media messages or verbal messages, um, giving people examples of what others have done and calling them forth to demonstrate their gratitude for inclusion by behaving in similar ways. So, I'm looking at the clock and I want to be within 30 minutes today. So I am going to simply invite you to take this up in your church in whatever way makes sense to you, what you can do in the with the conversations you have with other members of the church as a member. You don't have to be in charge of anything to express gratitude for inclusion and the commitment to inclusion that is evident and or growing in your spiritual community. And if you happen to be a member of Centers for Spiritual Living and you would like to have more information about people who are Black who have been contributors over the years within religious science, I am doing a kind of a workshop. It's a Black History boot camp, actually, coming up on November 19th. Let me tell you a little about it, and then we will close out the show. So that'll be coming up in a couple of weeks. If you want to know more about some of the contributions of Black folks within CSL over the decades, then that might be a way that you begin to prepare for Black History Month 2026. And I'm so glad that we have Fabian joining us from Jamaica via the UK. Oh my goodness. Welcome, welcome. And I hope that you got something that you could use from today's show. Hey, everybody. I'm here every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time. Always have to think what time zone. Noon Mountain Time. And I love that you have joined me today. And I hope that you will join me again and invite others to do the same. See you next time.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.